Well, hello there. All right, so a couple of just examples of things to practice. These are old homework assignments and related to your homeworks. So here is an assignment to change the read analog voltage to take two inputs rather than just a single input on pins A0 and pin A3, and then print them all both out on a single line that looks nice like this with units and commas and definitions to do this. So this is what the output should look like. It should print this once each through the loop. So if we look at the solution, here is the original example that we've talked about. It reads analog 0, it converts it to a voltage and prints the voltage, just the number. And here's the updated version. We're reading the original A0 and we've added this line in green. Sensor 2 comes from pin A3. So this is an implicit, the declaration is a compound statement here and the definition, so following that style. This comment got wrapped around, but here is the conversion from the original code, and here's the conversion for the new one. So we've got the new variable sensor 2, and we're converting it in a new variable voltage 2. So we read the two pins, we convert them to the right units, and now we're printing them out. So again, we're mixing print statements with quotes and print statements with variables. So we want to print out the beginning set voltage A0 is colon space, then put the number, then space, volts, comma, voltage A3. So all of this gets copied every time as a string, and then the number, and then the other text follows. And the last one is serial print line. So we get this. We print out this text, including the space, then the number, then the space, all of this text, including this space, then the variable number, then the space, and this text is the last thing. And then it's a new line, so the next one comes around here. The last example here is to do a for loop, so a similar kind of thing, but we're printing inputs 0 through 3 using a for loop. So rather than copying and pasting it over and over again, we're going to use a loop and print them all out individually. So it's a little bit trickier, but it saves some code and looks a little bit nicer. And if you're reading 100 inputs or something like that, you definitely wouldn't want to copy and paste it 100 times. So here we want a list of outputs, same way. We're not going to convert them to volts this time, just to be a little bit different, but we want to say voltage readings, and then which reading and the number, which reading and the number, which reading and the number. So we have to print out the index, the pin that we're reading, and then the voltage that we read on the pin, and then we'll finish and start over. So if we think about this, we have to print the header, which is the beginning part, voltage readings, colon, space. Then we have to print an A, then we have to print which one we're reading, then the actual reading, and then we do that again. So parts of this are going to be inside the loop, and parts of this are going to be at the beginning, and then at the very end of the loop, we have to send the line back with a carriage return or a print line statement. So let's look at this code, and you can pause and rewind if you need to, because it's a little bit to get through here. But we've defined an array to store everything. We don't actually have to do that because we only use them one at a time, but we're going to save an integer with 4 elements. So 0 through 3 are the index numbers. And then we're going to have II is our counter index, so it's a char because it only counts up to 4 or to 3. And then down here is our for loop. So we're using II as the loop index, and it's going from 0 to 3, counting by 1. Curly bracket here to curly bracket there is our for loop. Each time through the loop, it reads pin II. So normally we put with analog read something like A0 or A1, but you could just put a 0 and that's the same as A0. So we're using the index here as the pin to read, and this is the index into the array. So ADC read 0 reads pin 0, which matches up nicely. we've already printed voltage reading colon, and so now we're going to print space A, because we want to print A0, A1, and so forth. Then we're going to print 0, 1, 2. This is the loop index. There's a funny thing if you print chars, this is a char variable type, it thinks it's ASCII characters. So if you print 2, it actually will show up on your terminal as whatever the lookup table for 2 is. So we're casting it to an int here, so it prints it out. There are other ways to force serial print to print a number, but this works. So it's just printing the number instead of a weird character. If we changed this to int, we could get away with that too. So we print A0, then a colon and a space, and then we print the value that we read, the number. Then it goes up to the next time through the loop, and it's going to read, it's going to store analog reading from pin 1 into the element 1. It's going to print A1 and the value for A1, and then 2, and then 3. So it's going to go through, and at the end it's going to have a number. So we do serial print line with just spaces just to hit that carriage return. There are other ways to do it, but this works just fine. And then a little pause just to slow things down. So you can see careful use of the serial print commands can give you really sophisticated outputs. The for loop is another way to go through indices and count things up. Computers are good at counting. And another tip is that analog read doesn't need to have an A0 kind of input. It can just have a 0 or a 1 or a 2, and that's the same as A0 somewhere in the Arduino libraries. A0 is a pound define that just means 0. So it reads better to people. All right, so I hope you've learned something about these examples. Please try them all out and do your homework. Read through the documentation if this has gone a little bit too fast for you. They slow it down and they really go through line by line in the Arduino documentation. So I do recommend that. And of course, ask me questions if you have them. Otherwise, see you in the next video.